this event, we really hope to give you a different idea, a different perspective on Pier Paolo Pasolini, who is very well known as a literary writer, as an intellectual, as a filmmaker, maybe less well known as a very experimental, multifaceted artist who was interested in fine arts, painting, but also in music. And so our idea is to celebrate his memory. As you probably know, in a few days, November the 2nd, it will be the 50th anniversary of his assassination in Ostia, close to Rome. And we decided, the Modern Languages and Literature Department decided to homage Pasolini by looking at his relationship with music. I really would like to warmly thank Professor Paolo Prato, because he devises all the evening, all the event, and I want to say that several colleagues are writing me saying, oh, that's a great idea. Yes, the very basic idea maybe is mine, but all the organization was done by Professor Prato, and very important and essential parts of tonight's lecture will be by him. As you know, Professor Prato teaches music, and he's an expert on music. I would like to thank the Modern Languages and Literature Department for sponsoring and supporting the event, but let me thank and welcome our two guests, singer Isabella Alfano and pianist Domenico Sanna. They accepted to join us to present four songs on the several songs written by Pasolini. Their CV is very intense, very articulate. I want just to remember you that Isabella Alfano is a versatile singer whose repertoire spans classical music, jazz, canzone italiana, Napolitan, Sardinian, obviously Romanesque. And she began her musical journey when she was 11 years old, and then she earned a degree in jazz singing. Domenico Sanna is a very acclaimed and established pianist, and he recorded more than 50 albums. Both work very closely to Officina Pasolini, and again, we are very happy to have them here, and I'm sure you will enjoy their songs and their live executions. Having said this, I want to start with the event. Maybe other people will come. As you know, several professors from the department have classes until 7:15, so they might join, so forgive us, but some professors are teaching now, but they will arrive probably later. And so let's start. I will leave the floor to Professor Prato for his introduction of the first song. Grazie.
Thank you, Federica. Thanks to you for coming to this event, and thanks a lot to our guests who will be performing just in a few minutes. I also want to thank all the technical staff and the Department of Communication who is recording this evening. And last but not least, let me thank the Faculty Support Office and Zini in particular, who was absolutely helpful in organizing this event. Okay, we all know that probably Pasolini was in love with music. He danced the tango, he danced the Madison, the twist. Maria Callas adored him when he hired her as a protagonist of his Medea, and it seems that they even had a relationship. In a Rai interview, he said that he liked the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. But we know that his true love was classical music, which he used extensively in many of his films. Think of the Vangelo di San Matteo, St. Matthew's Gospel, with the music of Bach and Mozart and all this stuff. Well, when did his interest in another type of music begin? By another type, I mean folk songs and popular songs. We can go back to 1952, when Pasolini was commissioned to prepare an anthology of 20th century vernacular Italian poetry. He published a book called Canzoniere Italiano, Italian Songbook, in 1955, in which he collected 800 texts of folk songs from all regions of Italy, including popular songs of the two world wars, fascist and partisan songs. Just to make a comparison, a year later, Italo Calvino would have published Fiabe Italiane, Italian fairy tales. Pasolini even anticipated the ethnomusicological campaigns of Alan Lomax and Diego Carpitella. Diego Carpitella was the founder of ethnomusicology in Italy, although Pasolini didn't have any particular knowledge of the methods of ethnomusicology. In that work, he discovered the charm of simple mainstream songs that were also a product of an industrial society. Let me quote a couple of lines from an article that he wrote on Vie Nuove, 1964. He wrote, "Nothing better than canzonette," that is little silly songs. Nothing better than canzonette have the magical, abjectly poetic power of evoking a lost time. I challenge anyone to evoke the post-war period better than what Stessa spiaggia, stesso mare can do. For the Italians, this song represents a standard. For non-Italians, it means nothing, but it was a beach song. It was a summer hit that year. In another passage, Pasolini evoked Proust by saying, "The most violent, blind, and irrepressible heart interruptions are those experienced when listening to a little song." It is precisely what Proust had written a few decades earlier. So bad music was valorized by him because he was able to speak to the heart more than noble origin artifacts. And in that particular sense, Pasolini was at odds with the intellectual left of the time, which exalted the counter songs, the protest songs, those songs that were full of social content. He was an heretic, we all know that, against the tide. He was poorly tolerated by his comrades. However, he insisted by claiming that people have no voice, thus they sing. Songs give voice to the people. Even in an article in Sorrisi e Canzoni, which some Italians know what it is, a gossip music magazine, absolutely popular, he defended Claudio Villa as the champion of the old guard of the melodic song against his young detractors who preferred other artists. But let me simply remind you, before I present our guest for the first performance, let me just remind you that in the late 50s, there was a great intellectual ferment aimed at the renewal of Italian song, represented by the rhetorical contents of the Sanremo festival, consolatory songs. In 1955, Zavattini in Cinema Nuovo called for the involvement of poets and writers to found what he called neorealist song, still unaccomplished in comparison with cinema. Cinema had neorealism, which was a sensation, but nothing like that was present in music. So Pier Paolo Pasolini started to engage himself as a songwriter. First, he wrote some villotte in Friulian dialect, his native dialect, for some variety shows. Then a great opportunity, and we come to the first example, a great opportunity was given by Giro a Vuoto in 1960, a show with newly released songs written by poets, actors, and intellectuals, all belonging to the left area of culture. From that show came Tre canzoni romanesche, centered on the character of a prostitute. Those songs mix literary Italian and literary dialect, pure Italian and dialect, yes. It was an experiment, and we have the chance of hearing this song once again revived live, thanks to the voice of Isabella Alfano and the piano of Domenico Sanna. Please.
Macri Teresa, detta pazzia, fu Nazareno a me, abitua via del Mandrione alla baracca 23. C'ho 10 anni e beh così, che vuoi da me? Me do la vita da più di un anno, che altro ancora vuoi sapere? È disgraziata, ma c'ho un ragazzo che sa che ognuno pare un re, gli passa il grano, e beh, è così, che vuoi da me? Sì, lo vesto da testa ai piedi, la rasta, gli bigli, la capezza e il buciardello d'oro. Me s'è lumata, ero ciumaca, mentre che stavo a lavorare. Lui è un danzone e me portava sulla gilera a danzare, tutto pastoso. E beh, è così. E che ci vuoi fare? Da più di un anno, tutta moina, io me te sposo qua e là. Poi è venuto per me il momento per ripiegarmi a camminare a Caracalla. E beh, è così. E che gli vuoi fare? E mo che ti sei messo in testa? Na faccia sta cantata de core. Non ce sono in famona. Io so de vita, sor commissario, ormai so fatta e che la un giorno o l'altro ce lo sapevo che me toccava a provare le mantellate. Oh, per me non sta a tremà. Solo me rode se mi chiudete, che si ritrova senza argento, ma ogni modo per qualche tempo con l'oro mio camperà senza fa buffi. Oh, per me a tremà non sta. Non è nullo dico il nome suo non lo ricordo, si chiama amore e basta.
Thanks a lot. You heard this song has a jazz feel. It is not by chance. It was composed by Piero Umiliani, who was a great jazz pianist and a composer whose music introduced jazz in many film soundtracks starting from the 50s, precisely. Domenico Sanna knows very well, being himself a jazz musician and teacher. Pasolini's thoughts were collected at a certain point by Avanguardia. There was a review belonging to the youth communists at the time, FIGC. In 1956, he declared in an interview to this review, it can be said that the present-day canzonetta is simply an aspect of ideological diffusion by the dominant class onto the dominated class. That's purely Gramsci thought. But given this, he says, I don't see why both the music and the words of canzonette shouldn't be nicer. The intervention of a cultivated and perhaps refined poet would not be deplorable. On the contrary, such a contribution would be stimulating and welcome. So he was totally open to receive this mass medium and use it in different ways. And he started by using the dialect in his song. There was a song sung in Roman dialect, which was an expressive tool that, according to his idea, was proposed to contrast the homogenization, the progressing homogenization taking root in Italy. In fact, he argued that the Italian language was losing its expressive power and was gradually becoming a sterile means of communication. He associated the dialect with positive values of the folk, of the people, in contrast to bourgeois culture. And in addition to that, the motivation for choosing a proletarian setting in this song and the other two that we'll be listening soon, lies in a well-defined political intent upon which Pasolini built his ideal of resistance against the consumerism that was used to reinforce, to a certain extent, a control over society. Now we have on a playlist an example of a song that was included in one of his films, in particular in Capriccio all'Italiana, an episode where he used Totò and Ninetto Davoli and Laura Betti as main actors. In this case, the song was written by Domenico Modugno, and he wrote the lyrics, of course, and it is a kind of a rereading of Shakespeare's Othello, set in a puppet theater. We can watch a couple of minutes of this video clip.
Basta. Bravazzi, non ci fare caso. Una volta per uno, tocca a tutti. Io possa essere dannato se no ti amo, e se così non fosse non capirei più niente. Tutto il mio folle amore lo soffia il cielo, lo soffia il cielo, così. Ma l'erba suavemente delicata di un profumo che dai spasimi.
Ecco, se le porta via. Non le vedremo più.
Tu non
Addio,
fossi
Iago.
mai nata.
Addio, Otello. Addio per sempre.
Tutto il mio folle amore lo soffia il cielo, lo soffia il cielo, così. Il derubato che sorride ruba qualcosa al ladro, ma il derubato che piange ruba qualcosa a se stesso. Perciò io mi dico, finché sorriderò, tu non sarai perduta. Ma queste son parole.
Clearly, we hope that then you look at the whole clips. In both the example came to my mind that you can see Pasolini's combination between, let's say, folk pop music and high culture, because in the Teresa there was the line in the Turandot, your name is molto nome amore, and here is a rewriting of Shakespeare, so you can see these two souls of Pasolini, the same that you can see in the soundtrack of especially a Cattone, in which he combines classical music and specifically Bach and popular music or Stornelli, in anticipation of what we will see at the end of this evening in Mamma Roma. Paolo asked me to introduce the relationship between Pasolini and Rome, and I think that is such a complex topic that the first and most important information is that Pasolini was not from Rome. So he moved to Rome in 1950 with his mother, living on his back a very tense, familiar, personal, legal, and financial situation. First years of Pasolini in Rome were particularly difficult, and Pasolini actually lived in the peripheries, and specifically in Ponte Mambolo, in the eastern outskirts of Rome. And as we all know, the Rome that Pasolini loved was the Rome of the peripheries and the suburbs, or more specifically of the Borgate. If you want to have in mind what was Rome when Pasolini came to the city, think to neorealism, because we were at the very beginning of Rome and Italy recovering from the Second World War, still far from the Roman holiday, although actually the Roman holiday was made in 1953, but still far from La Dolce Vita idea of Rome that, by the way, is not the Rome that Pasolini was looking for and wanted to present. We think that this is the only landscape, literally and cinematic landscape of Pasolini. This is wrong. Rome was very important during the 50s and in the early 60s, and as Professor Prato said, particularly in relation with this poetic myth and also social and political idea of subalternate, or rather subproletarian people living in the peripheries as the last authentic kind of humanity, with their ethics, with their history, their culture, not yet corrupted by the new capitalism and the society of consumerism. As we all know, Pasolini will drastically change this idea in the second half of the 60s, but for sure the Roman peripheral and marginal landscape is the most iconic Pasolini's, is what we connect, we link to Pasolini's cinematic literary works, but also poems. The first one of the first collection, Le Ceneri di Gramsci, but also Poesia in forma di rosa, deals with the very, very first-hand knowledge of Rome. I said he was not from Rome, but he really used to spend his times, even when he moved closer to the center, with people from Borgate. It's there that he met the most important actors of his cinema, Ninetto Davoli, Franco Citti, and also Franco Citti's brother, Sergio Citti, who will eventually become a filmmaker himself, and that help Pasolini with the Romanesque, because Pasolini learned Romanesque as a second language, basically. I think that in the first novel he wrote, Ragazzi di Vita, there was really a dictionary to express, to clarify this very original and attentive interest towards dialect. So I think we have already an introduction to one of the typical characters of Pasolini. Here in Cristo al Mandrione, we have typical, the prostitute from the Mandrione. Mandrione was mentioned also in the previous song, was one of these locations that Pasolini used to explore along with other intellectuals, the arch of the Aqueduct Felice, where since the bombing of San Lorenzo, thousands of people used to live with barracks, and actually they remained there until the middle of the 70s. Pasolini, with other intellectuals, how can I say, not only poetically use this location, but also understanding the difficulties of this living. For those who know Mamma Roma, it's interesting that the last line of the song is more or less what Mamma Roma said in her second monologue, where she asked to Christ and to Jesus to look at her. And again, this is one of my favorite songs, and so enjoy it. And I'm very happy of the selection of Cristo al Mandrione.
E chi me dentro qua tutta nuda e frascica fino all'ossa de guazza. Intorno a me che c'è 4 muri zozzi, un tavolo, un bidet. Figlia me, se ci sei Gesù Cristo, guardami tutta zozza de pianto. Abbi pietà di me, io che non so niente, e te è re dei re. Lavora senza mai rifiata, moro ma l'anima non sa. Io che non so niente, e te è re dei re. Lavora senza mai rifiata, moro ma l'anima non sa. Figlia me, se ci sei Gesù Cristo. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Domenico. We heard a song this time composed by another great film music musician and also himself a great pianist, Piero Piccioni, whom, by the way, I was lucky to interview just a few months before he died in his home on L'Aventino. Now, I want to briefly introduce the chapter devoted to songs inspired by Pasolini, not written by him, but written by other people. There is a great profusion of tributes, songs, and poems set to music. Let me at least mention Una storia sbagliata by Fabrizio De André, commissioned by Rai as a signature tune of a TV program, and Francesco De Gregori's Appa. But I have chosen for you 2 examples that do not belong, let's say, to the mainstream. One comes from Giovanna Marini, the matriarch of folk revival in Italy. She met Pasolini in the late 50s when she had just started her activity as a professional musician. And Giovanna Marini devoted so many works and so many recordings to someone with whom she was always in touch with. I chose Lamento per la morte di Pier Paolo Pasolini. I found a vintage recording dating back to the glorious years of the folk club here in Rome, now disappeared for a long time. And so we can hear the extraordinary voice of Giovanna and a composition that has nothing to do with the song format. It has to do with a ballad. And in the end, you will hear the voice of Giovanna lamenting It's a song of mourning. It's a song where, in the end, she utilizes the singing technique that she learned while doing research on field by the weeping women crying at funerals in the south of Italy. Lamento per la morte di Pier Paolo Pasolini.
Che la morte m'ha venuta a visitare e leva le gambe tue da questo regno. Persi le forze mie, persi l'ingegno, le 11 le volte che l'ho visto, gli vidi in faccia la mia gioventù. Oh Cristo, me l'hai fatto un bel disgusto, le 11 le volte che l'ho visto, le 11 un quarto io mi sento ferito, davanti agli occhi ho le mani spezzate e la lingua mi diceva andate, andata. Le 11 un quarto io mi sento ferito, le 11 e mezzo mi sento morire e la lingua mi cercava le parole e tutto mi diceva che non giova. Alle 11 e mezzo io mi sento morire, a mezzanotte io mo da confessare che cerco il perdono dalla madre mia e questo è un dovere che ho da fare. Io a mezzanotte mo da confessare, ma quella notte volevo parlare e la pioggia, il fango e l'auto per scappare, solo a morire lì vicino al mare, ma quella notte io volevo parlare e può più parlare, può più parlare, non può più parlare, può più parlare, non può più parlare. Persi le forze mie, persi l'ingegno, che la morte m'ha venuta a visitare e leva le gambe tue da questo regno. Persi le forze mie, persi l'ingegno.
Okay, that was Giovanna Marini. Even less known is the next song that I'm presenting to you. It comes from a group that is not known at all in Italy, Coil. They belong to the art rock post-punk area. And they wrote a song called Ostia, subtitled The Death of Pasolini. The video has nothing to do, it's an editing of scenes from his movies, but you should hear the words and the sound, which is kind of tragic.
Sluggish golden river, a sickly golden trickle, a golden sticky trickle. You can hear the bones humming, you can hear the bones humming, and the chorus is over. The body in the basin, in the shallow sea-flame basin. And the chorus is over, and his body rolls over, crushed the shoulder. You can hear the bones humming, singing like a conjure, singing like a puncture.
This is an example that makes clear that Pasolini's, let's say, fame, to a certain extent, reached across the borders and even reached the most underground areas of non-mainstream music. But they are not the only ones, there are others. Going back to Giro a Vuoto, let me remind you that it was born out, that show where Pasolini wrote his 4 songs, was born out of a call by the magazine Avanguardia, urging poets to write songs, like in France or like in Naples many years before. And it was an episode absolutely seminal in the history of Italian music, but absolutely ignored, neglected at least. Laura Betti, who was the star of the show, she was the only one performing those songs, had text written for her by Vittorio Gassman, by Bonucci, by Vittorio Caprioli, who were intellectual actors, I would say, not just actors. And she made a record. But then there was another edition after the first one with text by actors, edition when another album was released with text by Moravia, Soldati, and names such as Goffredo Parise, Arbasino, Fortini, Flaiano, Siciliano, Camilla Cederna, and of course, Pier Paolo Pasolini. So a long list of eminent personalities of Italian literature, Italian culture. They all participated in this, let's say, enterprise that had no sequels. The references of, for most of those songs was the Weimar Cabaret in Germany, with the music of Kurt Weill and lyrics by Bertolt Brecht. That was their model. And among the composers who wrote the music for that show were Piero Piccioni, were Umiliani, Maselli, Franco Nebbia, Fiorenzo Carpi, Gino Negri, all great musicians swinging between yes, high cultural classical music and cabaret and popular music. Our third example is probably the most well-known of them all, because it was recorded by a good number of artists. So before calling our 2 guests on the stage, I want to prepare you so that you might enjoy Isabella's singing even better, because you'll be familiar already with the melody. And I want to share a few seconds of Laura Betti's original recording, and then Gabriella Ferri's own interpretation. So, just a minute by Laura Betti. Okay.
Mi sono fatta un quartino, ma data la testa, ammazza che non va, Nina, rocetta modesta, lasciatemi fa. Vedi le foglie, vedi la luna, vedi le case, chi l'ha mai viste con st'occhi me parte sognare.
now a second version, much later one, by this time an authentic Roman artist, Gabriella Ferri, the voice of the people, although she was also a pop singer and participated in Sanremo Festival in 1969, singing with Stevie Wonder.
Mi so fatta un quartino, ha dato la testa, ammazza che toppa. Annina è roscetta, è modesta, e lassate mi fa. Vedi le foglie, vedi la luna, vedi le case. E chi l'ha mai viste con quest'occhi mi viene da cantare. La salve verde e vado un'altra. Stasera cocco, niente da fare. E poi sono vecchia, c'ho 30 anni.
Okay, let's not spoil the whole thing, okay? So let's play it all from the beginning to the end, Isabella and Domenico.
Mi so fatta un quartino, m'ha dato la testa, ammazza che toppa. Annina, roscetta e modesta, lassate me fa. Vedi le foglie, vedi la luna, vedi le case. E chi l'ha mai viste con st'occhi mi viene da cantare. Lassame perde e va da un'altra. Stasera cocco, niente da fa. E poi so vecchia, c'ho 30 anni e il mondo ancora l'ho da guardare. Mamma mia che luci che vedo qua attorno, le vie di staccio mi pare ne come de giorno de un'altra città. Vedi le porte, vedi i bari, vedi la gente, vedi le fronne che st'aria se sta a sfarfallare. Va via amoretto e fa la tenda, stasera godo la libertà. Spara il guzzetto e torna a casa, che mamma tua ti sta aspettando. Mi so presa una toppa e mo so felice, me passi ciecamme, me sento tornata un fiore de verginità. Verginità, verginità. Me sento tutta verginità. Che sarà, che sarà, chi lo sa, chi lo sa, che sarà, chi lo sa, che sarà, che sarà, chi lo sa, che sarà, chi lo sa.
I like the arrangement that switches between the begin to tango. So it's another mood with respect to the original, but I think it's absolutely suited. Now we have Federica telling us a little bit about Pasolini production in his own native dialect.
Yes, just to give you an idea that along with Roman dialect, Pasolini was very interested in Friulan dialect. His mother, Susanna Pasolini's native dialect. Pasolini spent several years in Friuli, in Casarsa, specifically in Casarsa, from 1943 to 1949. And he learned dialect. Actually, his first collection of poems was written in Friulan, Poesia Casarsa, in 1942, when Pasolini was only 20 years old. Then he returned to these early poems in two different phases of his career as a poet. And keep in mind that Pasolini always wanted to be, above all, a poet. And this was with Meglio Gioventù, in which he rewrote several of the poems of Poesia Casarsa, saying that originally the Friulian dialect was for him an invented language, a language that, as Professor Prato said before, express a sort of anti-established language of poetry, or this original, archaic idea of the rural world that Italy was missing, was destroying during the economic miracle. And then actually the last book of poems that Pasolini published, La Nuova Gioventù, was again in Friulan dialect, and it was when he wrote Meglio Gioventù, he said, now this is a learned language, lingua inventata e lingua imparata. Again, this idea that for sure he saw in dialects original, native, archaic language, but his intervention on these languages was very literary, very sophisticated. And the song that we are going to listen is entitled Donzelle. I'm from northern Italy, but not from Friuli, and means a boy, a young boy. And I'm glad that Paolo chose also to show this maybe less well-known aspect of Pasolini's poetry, so you can see and hear also the music in words, because Pasolini was a musician himself, obviously as a poet in words. And so thanks again, and we have a video, correct, for Donzelle. The title, I think, is Donzelle, myself, as I think, no, the original title maybe. He's talking about himself. Thank you, Paolo, for this choice.
Oh, me donzelle, io in asta l'odor che la ploia sospira, la ploia sospira, sospira dai bras di erba viva, io inas dal spieli dalla
another sound, the sound of another dialect up north in the northeast of Italy. By the way, Elsa Martin and Stefano Battaglia have a long time relationship with Pasolini's poems, because both Poesia Casarsa and Poesie in forma di rosa and Poesie dimenticate have been treated into music and turned into theatrical shows and records. This is their last one, which appeared precisely this year. Stefano Battaglia is a jazz pianist and composer, and Elsa Martin is a vocalist from Friuli. Going on towards the end of our event, very briefly, I have another shocking example for you, coming from the extreme avant-garde and experimental music by one of the iconic divas of that area. I don't know if you're familiar with Diamanda Gallas. Never heard of it. Paolo knows probably. Diamanda Gallas has an incredible voice, and which does not belong to any category. And although she possibly doesn't know a word of Italian, she got into Pasolini's works and poems, and she decided to recite, to act one of his poems, Supplica a mia madre, with some music in the background. So just a few seconds of this experiment, which I think is absolutely amazing.
È difficile dire con parole di figlio ciò a cui nel cuore ben poco assomiglio. Tu sei la sola al mondo che sa del mio cuore ciò che è stato sempre prima di ogni altro amore. Per questo devo dirti ciò che rende conoscere, ed entra la tua grazia che nasce la mia angoscia. Sei insostituibile.
Okay, it was just another step, another chapter when Pasolini was influential. There is another example that comes from a movie that it was not directed by him, a movie directed by a Serbian filmmaker in 74, if I remember well, called Sweet Movie. Pasolini and Dacia Maraini, who was very young at the time, they both collaborated to translate the dialogues in the Italian, for the Italian version. And that work included translated two songs written by the great Greek composer Manos Hadjidiakis, who, for those who know the film and the song, is the one who wrote Never on Sunday, a big standard of international pop music in the early 60s, and the chartbuster, a great movie. Anyway, Pasolini and Dacia Maraini wrote the text for a song that has been in the film, was sung by a teenager at her debut, but I chose for you a cover version sung by a Polish pop singer, recorded on French television. And that again shows the diffusion of Pasolini all around Europe. It's called I ragazzi giù nel campo, music by Hadjidiakis and words by Pasolini and Maraini.
Chanson s'intitule Les mauvais enfants de la vallée. Alors
ce sont fantasmes de conséquences, c'était très très. Mais chanson et elle a
has a Greek flavor.
I ragazzi giù nel campo non si curano del tempo, ma si buttano dentro i fiumi per pescare la croce premio. I ragazzi giù nel campo danno la caccia ad un passo, poi lo strozzano con le mani e lo bruciano in riva al mare. Vieni figlia della luna, della stella mattutina, che regala a questi ragazzi le carezze del gran cielo. I ragazzi giù nel campo danno la caccia.
Okay. Now we have our fourth song written by Pasolini, this time in Italian, always included in that show Giro a Vuoto. It's called Ballata del Suicidio. This time it's a song in Italian, not in Romanesque. And I want to invite Isabella and Domenico back on the stage. Thank you.
Pietà, pietà, voi mi volete morta e sepolta, senza voce, senza gesti, senza viso, senza vita, che non torni, voi dite, mai più la pazzia che sa fu qui tra noi. Pietà, pietà, gente felice, voi mi sperate, impiccata, annegata, incendiata, maciullata, che sta a fare, voi dite, se fa solo rabbia e lo sa qui tra noi. Pietà, pietà, gente per bene, voi mi temete, nel mio amore, nel mio vizio, nel mio ardore, nel mio odio, perché vive, voi dite, qua giù, peccatrice, tabù qui tra noi. Pietà, pietà, gente normale, mi condannate a tremare, ad odiare, a celarmi, a sparire. Chi è diverso, voi dite, non può rimanere neanche un po' qui tra noi. Pietà, pietà, gente al potere, voi minacciate, con l'arresto, con la cella, con l'agonia, con il rogo, la passione voi dite non dà che fastidi e ansietà qui tra noi. Pietà, pietà, pareva eterno il mio destino di parlare, di cantare, di godere, di peccare, ma sì, per me è finita, state tranquilli, entro nell'ombra, vi lascio il mondo.
Thanks a lot, Isabella. Thanks a lot, Domenico. We loved your performances, which were the pearls of tonight's event. We only have just a few seconds to conclude the event because just a few years ago, precisely 4 years ago, an old friend of mine, a colleague, Luciano Ceri, discovered that Pasolini was the author of the lyrics that Anna Magnani sings in his Mamma Roma, in his her Stornelli. Stornelli from Mamma Roma. It was proved by a document that is at CI, at the society that takes care of royalties and copyright. So after that, it was a surprise for all fans of popular music. And we have the chance of course, we all know that scene, but now we know that it was Pasolini who wrote those lyrics, which will be projecting in Romanesque and English, if I'm Stornelli di Mamma Roma. That's sorry? Oh, it's not there. Oh, okay. Doesn't really matter. I had prepared, I'm pretty sure, the lyrics and the English version, but if it's not on that file, let's forget it, and let's hear this satirical conflict between two voices, the male and the female, and then the third character shows up to say something more. Okay, Stornelli from Mamma Roma.
Mettevela a sede, ci ho visto morire uno l'altro giorno così. Ma che ci volete insegnare la Bibbia a noi? La messa l'ha detta cantata! La Mamma Roma, facciate una bella cantata dei cori. Chi la canta? Ma la Mamma Roma. Fior de gaggia, quando canto io canto con allegria, e se io dico tutto rovino sta compagnia. A Carmine, battete a te che sta forte ancora. Fatto nero, Carmine. Fiore de sabbia, tu ridi scherzi e fai la santa donna, e invece in petto schiatti dalla rabbia. Fiore de menta, ferme de bocca che c'è un innocente, è meglio che non veda e che non senta. Fiore de cucuzza, una donna per sti baffi andava pazza, e adesso che la persi ce va in puzza. Brava Clementina! Fiore de mer. Io mi sono liberata da una corda, adesso tocca un'altra a fa la serva. La sola sposa, senza invidia, auguri, sono libera,
Okay, that was our last clip, and we can stop here, thanking all of you who were here and following very carefully. I want to thank again Isabella Alfano and Domenico Sanna for their precious job. Please. Thanks to all. Also thanks to Chiara, who was helpful in assisting us with the organization, the clips and everything. And that's it. We can go.